Hey everybody, I'm Avid, the creative director for Divergent Realities, and we've been working on Cards and Tankards for quite some time now. If you guys are watching this, it's because you guys are interested in the lore of the game that we haven't been able to give to you guys thus far. But today is your chance to kind of take a sneak peek behind what we've been working on for so long, and are so excited to share with you guys. So please enjoy the following. It's going to be a little bit long, but if you guys stick with us, you're going to have some juicy bits in here. We'll try to get some visuals maybe for a future YouTube video. For now, this is going to be mostly text, but enjoy the ride. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to get started. Give me a thumbs up in chat if everybody can see the screen and can read it okay. I tried to make it as large as I could. I also made sure to go dark mode to not flashbang anybody. Good to go? All right. I'll start with reading a little bit, and then K-Fox, you and I can kind of take turns going through some of this stuff, okay? So for everybody, we are going to start off with one of the most foundational concepts for this entire universe, and it's going to be seen throughout all of our plot points and story for the most part, and that is Aether. In the vast tapestry of the cosmos, where worlds and realms intertwine, exists a primordial force known as Aether. This ethereal essence, harnessed from the very fabric of creation, holds immense power and is believed to be the catalyst behind the birth of the universe and everything within it. Aether resonates with the essence of magic, and its influence ripples throughout the cosmos, shaping the worlds it touches. At the heart of the universe lies the focal point of Aether's might, a place of unimaginable energy and convergence. It is here, in this celestial epicenter, that the highest concentrations of Aether resides. The closer a planet or realm is to this center, the more potent the manifestation of magical forces becomes within its domain. As the celestial bodies spiral outward from the center nexus, the presence of Aether gradually diminishes. Far-flung worlds situated on the periphery of the universe may possess only faint traces of this mystical energy, while those fortunate to be nestled closer to the core experience the full breadth of its power. Consequently, the elemental forces that permeate these worlds are more vibrant, readily accessible, and interwoven into the fabric of their existence. The influence of Aether on a world manifests in the form of various magical elements, each carrying its unique properties and capabilities. Some chaos elements include ferocious fires, violent winds, and the engulfing darkness, while other order elements include the solidified earth, the flowing water, and radiant light. Each are linked to distinct aspects of creation and imbued with its own set of rules and limitations. The interplay between these elements shape the very nature of magic within a realm, guiding the spells, enchantments, and mystical practices of its inhabitants. You guys may have seen this graphic before, and this is kind of talking about some of these points, and we're going to get into this. Journeys to the core of the universe, where Aether is most concentrated, are perilous. Even divine beings are unable to approach the source of creation, as the force expanding outward is so great that nothing could ever reach it. Crystallized forms of Aether, called aetherite, can be found scattered throughout the universe, though, and Soldamus, which is the planet we all play on, is one of the few planets blessed with a significant abundance that is commonly used in magical items and religious artifacts. Go ahead, K-Fox, and let's talk divine influences.
All right, divine influences. Divine influences in the universe are manifested through the interplay of four profound elements. Awareness, memory, emotion, and will encompass both positive and negative aspects. These divine influences shape the intricate tapestry of the universe, reflecting the complexities and dualities of existence. They remind us of the delicate balance between light and dark and the choices we face while navigating our own divine nature within this vast cosmic symphony. You want me to hit memory?
We can keep taking turns off title after title. We can do that way.
Yeah, your turn.
All right. The first of the divine influences, and we're going in this order for a reason, and you'll see very soon. Memory. Memory is one of the divine influences in the universe, holds a profound significance. It serves to preserve the wisdom, experiences, and knowledge of the divine. It encapsulates the collective consciousness of the cosmos, carrying the imprints of countless moments, events, and lessons learned throughout time and space. Memory grants the divine a repository of profound insight and power. It holds the key to unlocking ancient wisdom, unveiling forgotten truths about the creation and destruction of all things. However, memory also carries the weight of past traumas and painful experiences linked with the knowledge recovered. It can become a burden, haunting and tormenting those who dive deeper into the the web of memories, even the divine. Foreshadow. It serves as a reminder of the imperfections and vulnerabilities that exist within a divine realm.
Divine influence awareness. Awareness, as one of the divine influences in the universe, encompasses a profound and expansive understanding of the interconnectedness and underlying truths of existence. It is the all-seeing eye of the divine, perceiving the intricate web of relationships, energies, and cosmic forces that shape the fabric of reality. This heightened awareness grants the divine a deep insight into the workings of the universe, unveiling the hidden patterns, profound mysteries, and fundamental laws that govern its very essence. Through awareness, the divine recognizes the profound interdependence of all beings and phenomena. It perceives the ripple effects of actions and choices, understanding the tangled matrix of cause and effect that span across time and space. This awareness instills a sense of responsibility and reverence for the delicate balance that sustains the cosmic order. Yet, awareness also bears witness to the shadows and hidden aspects that exist within the divine realm. It allows for the potential manipulation, deceit, and the misuse of power. This heightened understanding of the complexities of existence can bring forth a profound sense of vulnerability as the divine becomes acutely aware of its own limitations and fallibilities.
Divine influence, will. Will, as one of the divine influences in the universe, is an integral and powerful force that encompasses the determination, volition, and intention of all beings. It represents the driving force behind the manifestation of divine power and action. Will is a potent source of energy that shapes the course of cosmic events. It embodies the strength of purpose to bring about desired outcomes, to include the natural order of creation and death. Through will, the universe becomes a canvas upon which intentions are imprinted. Positive aspects of will include benevolence, justice, and the pursuit of harmony when driven by a genuine concern for the well-being and flourishment of all beings. However, will is not devoid of complexities, and some negative aspects include a rise in arrogance, a sense of dominance, or the value of self-preservation over mutual good. Will can lead to the imbalance, disharmony, and the oppression of those deemed inferior or unworthy. The will in all things is not fixed or immutable. It evolves and matures, guided by the lessons learned from experiences throughout existence. The interplay of the positive and negative aspects of will invites the divine to navigate the complexities of choice, responsibility, and the consequences of action. It encourages introspection, self-awareness, and the constant refinement of our intentions.
Divine influence, emotion. Emotion, as one of the divine influences in the universe, is a profound and dynamic force that adds depth and richness to the fabric of existence. It encompasses a vast spectrum of feelings, ranging from love, compassion, and joy to rage, sorrow, and despair. Emotion is the most common medium in which mortals can sense the presence of the divine within their world. The balancing of positive and negative emotions within the universe is essential to the existence of any one emotion. You cannot have joy without anger, nor hope without despair. Emotion grants depth and meaning to existence, evoking responses that transcend mere rationality. It adds a layer of complexity to the interactions between beings, fostering relationships and shaping the course of cosmic events. If the amount of happiness or joy becomes imbalanced in the universe, emotion, as one of the divine influences, will bring natural balance through anger or rage. The divine is invited to navigate the ebb and flow of emotions with wisdom and discernment, harnessing their power for equilibrium. In essence, emotion is the lifeblood of the divine, infusing the universe with vibrancy and profound resonance. It is through the expression and experience of emotions that the divine engages deeply with the world, shaping its journey and leaving an indelible mark upon the cosmic tapestry.
I can see that some of you guys in the chat are already drawing the connections between these explanations and some of our faction gods. And I see also we have a correction on some of those interpretations. You guys seem to have it pretty spot on. I know we've talked about it vaguely in the past, but now we're going to go a little bit more in depth. The true gods. There are four multidimensional beings who are manifestations of the four divine influences. Each has existed since the birth of the universe, and each will continue to live forever outside of time and space. Together, they make life possible in the universe, but as you will soon learn, not all want life in the universe to persist. And I'll continue since that was a short one. Varenthil, god of memory. Varenthil, the god of memory, exists as a tormented being, burdened by the divine influence of memory itself. Their divine essence is intrinsically tied to the collective memories of the universe, an immense and unbearable source of immeasurable pain. Over countless lifetimes, Varenthil's existence has grown increasingly distorted and twisted due to the weight of this influence, driving them to seek a permanent end to their suffering. Driven by a relentless quest for forbidden knowledge, Varenthil turned their attention to unraveling the mysteries of Aether, the primordial source of creation and destruction. They believed that by acquiring the knowledge and power associated with Aether, they could bring about the ultimate end of the universe and their own agonizing torment. In a desperate attempt to preserve their own sanity, Varenthil devised a plan to coax intelligent life into exploring the depths of existence and peer into the void, where the forbidden knowledge lay hidden. They sought out uniquely talented individuals and lured them with promises of enlightenment, while knowing that the mortal bodies of these seekers could only bear witness to a fraction of the vast truth. Tragically, many of these unsuspecting souls lost their minds or even their lives because of their pursuit. Those that survived would often recluse into dark, decrepit places, continuing to wither away while delving even further into the forbidden memories of the universe. It was not until Varenthil arrived at Soldamis, a planet of immense magical potential, that their efforts bore fruit. The dwarves, renowned for their prowess in engineering Aether-based artifacts, showed promise in their ability to harness fractions of the ancient power. Intrigued by this discovery, Varenthil's attention became fixated on the dwarven civilization, viewing them as a potential key to unlocking the deeper mysteries of Aether.
Varenthil, god of memory. Sorry, my dog.
Oh, I forgot to change the title here. That's supposed to be Talum, god of awareness. My bad.
There we go. Talum, god of awareness. All right, that makes so much more sense. All right. Talum, god of awareness. Talum, the god of awareness, possesses a gaze that encompasses the vast expanse of existence, perceiving all that is and all that has the potential to be. It is through this omnipotent insight that Talum becomes aware of Varenthil's abnormal interactions with various worlds, recognizing the true nature of their purpose. With Varenthil's desire to end the universe, threatening the nature of order and the very fabric of creation and life, Talum felt compelled to intervene. As a god closely connected to the principles of creation and life itself, Talum understood the urgent need to counter Varenthil's destructive path. They expanded their divine presence to Soldamis, becoming the second of the gods to manifest their influence there. Talum sought to thwart Varenthil's quest for forbidden knowledge and end their plans by empowering pawns of their own, individuals who could serve as guardians of balance and protectors of order. In response to Talum's divine intervention, a formidable but secretive group known as the Augur Order emerged on Soldamis. Its members, occasionally blessed with Talum's power of awareness, use the power of future sight to predict critical outcomes necessary to spread their influence and disrupt the dungeon masters at all costs. They also mastered the intricate art of luromancy, the magic of law and order. The Augur Order swiftly rose to prominence, assuming control over the major civilizations that inhabited the planet. But the dungeon masters continued to resist their authority through powerful forbidden magic. Once the other gods arrived, matters only became more complicated.
I apparently didn't change the title on any of these sections. So sorry about that. It was mostly copy pasting for formatting. My bad. But this should say, and here's a quick picture reference. These are just kind of conceptual references of fourth dimensional beings, color coordinated. But Credam, the god of will, embodies the driving force behind all aspects of existence, propelling the universe forward. Their divine influence sparks the flames of curiosity, ambition, greed, selfishness, and countless other manifestations of will that push the boundaries of progress and shape the course of existence. With an innate sense of curiosity, Credam was naturally drawn to Soldamis, following in the footsteps of their fellow gods, Varenthil and Talum. Observing Talum's actions against Varenthil, Credam found themselves compelled to choose a side in the unfolding conflict. However, envy simmered within their essence as they yearned for the powers and privileges of their divine counterparts. Feeling a sense of longing and discontent, Credam ultimately decided not to align with either faction, but instead embark on a personal quest to acquire the powerful relics hoarded by Varenthil's dungeon masters for themselves. Using their divine influence of will, Credam deftly manipulated the greed inherent within mankind and other races, stoking their desires to plunder the dungeons of the masters. Unbeknownst to these adventurers, they were unwitting pawns in Credam's intricate game. Blinded by their avarice, they ventured into the dangerous depths of the dungeons, facing perils they could scarcely fathom. Credam's motivations for collecting these treasures remained ambiguous at best. They harbored no concrete plan or purpose for the artifacts and relics other than possessing that which the other gods desired. The allure of holding these powerful treasures, knowing that they possessed what others coveted, fueled Credam's own desires and sated their envy.
Okay. Drock, the god of emotion, is what this heading should say.
Yes.
Drock, the god of emotion, remained unaware of the existence of Soldamis until Varenthil, Talum, and Credam's actions sent shockwaves through the natural order of the universe. The imbalance caused by Varenthil's masters, Talum's augur order, and Credam's plundering guild controlled the actions of lesser beings by often bypassing the emotions of the inhabitants of Soldamis, drew the attention of Drock in a whirlwind of tumultuous fury. Driven by their divine influence over emotion, Drock sought to restore balance by breaking these chains of oppression that held countless beings hostage and enslaved. Primarily utilizing forced rage as their tool, they unleashed a torrent of volatile emotion, liberating many who had fallen victim to the manipulations of the other gods. However, the destruction left in Drock's wake was inconsequential compared to the goal of restoring the natural order and balance of emotion in the universe. The surge of unrestrained emotion and rampant rage fueled a frenzied wild horde, comprised of creatures and beings who, under normal circumstances, would have never been driven to such aggressive and destructive behavior. As the wild horde tore through the countryside, small towns and villages were reduced to ash, and innocent lives were lost in the chaos. The god of emotion, fueled by their divine influence, had unleashed a storm of raw and uncontrolled emotion upon Soldamis, but Drock could not simply stop, as it would result in the continued imbalance the other gods had created.
So we've got a little bit of motivation for all of these gods being present. We have kind of antagonists and protagonists and just ambiguous presences kind of happening here in the major story, and these will evolve as time goes on, and you'll see that as we get into maybe the Crusade of Sun and Stone, some of the initial I guess not ambitions, but like, you know, what currently drives them in the current conflict, and that'll evolve as time goes on through the story that we tell you guys. But something else that's important to note is not everybody on Soldamis believes or follows these four gods. There are some who are not religious at all, and there are others who believe in a god, which we call technically the false gods, that they manifested through personal experiences of their own. So let's get into that a little bit. And these are some pretty good stories, so we're going to start getting into some of the good stuff here. The false gods. Sometimes sentient life looks for meaning in life in the wrong places, sees divinity in the astrological, and manifests a belief system in a god that does not exist, but still seemingly holds power over those who believe. Or should be believe, not believe. This is the case with Solaron, the sun god, and Lunariel, the moon goddess. Their influence was once immutable, and even though it has weakened, you can still see remnants of their presence today. And I'll read Solarism as well, if that's okay. Solarism is the worship of the sun god Solaron. The personification of the sun was not new to Soldamis, but the concept of Solaron as a deity did not exist before the proclamation of the sun-blinded soldier, which we'll get into a little bit later, which cemented the existence of a god of the sun in the minds of mortals across the world, and gave him a name and a prophecy, turning Solarism into a quickly spreading, organized religion. The prophecy, which led to the rise of Solarism, went as follows. Thousands of years ago, after a terrible battle that lasted all day and through the night, only one soldier was said to have remained, and there on the edge of the battlefield, over the cliff bordering the endless sea, as the sun was rising, the soldier swore he saw Solaron manifest in front of him, taller than an elf and as radiant and hot as the sun itself. The soldier claimed the ocean boiled and steamed around Solaron, creating an otherworldly fog lit by the god's presence. The soldier adds in his recollection that Solaron enlightened him with divine wisdom. The soldier was guided to share the need for all inhabitants of Soldamis to extinguish war and set alight life in the name of Solaron. This encounter supposedly blinded the soldier, as he did stare directly into the sun for an extended period while experiencing these visions. The result only added credibility to his claims, causing him to be remembered as the sun-blinded soldier, Solaron's first prophet. This, the first religion of Soldamus, was swiftly formed after the news spread of this impactful hallucination, and so too was the Holy Church of Solaron quickly founded, with the creation of the Children of the Dawn and the Sun Gazers of the Horizon soon to follow. The advent of lunarism and the sun-blinded soldier's assassination by Alara the Night Stalker hastened the growth of the Holy Church and spurred the creation of the Heralds of the Solstice and the Disciples of Radiance at the same time, unintentionally bolstering the cause of solarism in conjunction with the genesis of lunarism.
Okay, and so now we're going to hear about Lunariel and lunarism. So lunarism is the name for the worship of the goddess of the moon, Lunariel. Lunarism was founded as a response to the rise of solarism across Soldamus, and its followers believe their purpose is to ensure justice is served from the highest levels of government all the way down to the lowest back alley rivalries and everything in between. During the period referred to as the rise of solarism, there was a call for peace in the name of Solaron. To most, this was seen as a noble gesture, but to many, particularly those who had lost loved ones in the war survived by the sun-blinded soldier, it was also a call to allow their families' sacrifices to become forgotten, and a condemnation to a life where justice would never be served on their behalf. A small grassroots movement formed, showing support for the families of lost soldiers. This then blossomed into a faction of justice seekers ready for action. The first of them to follow through on lunarism's budding cause was Alara the Night Stalker, who assassinated the sun-blinded soldier in his home in Lunariel's name. Many believe it was Lunariel's silver light that led Alara to the soldier unchallenged and allowed her to return unharmed, legitimizing the movement and the beliefs that swirled around it. Before long, lunarism and Alara's actions altered the path of solarism, leading to the creation of the Heralds of the Solstice, as well as the Disciples of Radiance, while also growing lunarism to the point where its own two factions were naturally formed, the Blades of the Blood Moon and the Envoy of the Eclipse. The Blades are the enforcement arm of the cause, following through on necessary assassinations so that justice may be served when it otherwise might have been forgotten. The Envoy, on the other hand, works in the shadows to influence the political sphere, working with the blessings of Lunariel to alter systems in ways that will ensure the application of justice at every level.
Interesting stuff. We've hinted at some of the things. I know Lunariel and lunarism specifically have been more vague, and that's because the movement is less religious than, for instance, the solarism is, which we have like the Crusade of Sun and Stone expansion that you guys have experienced, and that we'll talk about the lore for in a little bit. But I think some of this should hopefully be new and kind of exciting to set a real foundation for like what religions and gods were believed in before the presence of these four gods, these four true gods kind of came to this planet, and then how the world is going to be evolving as their presence and influences are expanding. And again, we'll talk about that kind of with the Crusade of Sun and Stone, since that's really like the origin point where these major religions are seeing this influence start to spread and how they react to that, right? Next, we're going to get into the story of the sun-blinded soldier, and I'm going to read as much as I can without getting too emotional, hopefully, because every time I read this, it really like it gets to my feels. It's that good. At least I feel it personally. It's that good. Like, I mean, again, I don't know. I might just be biased, but it also has to do with the fact that as a veteran, some of the stuff I've gone through, I can kind of relate to. So if I do start choking up a bit, K-Fox, please take over for me. But I'll do my best here, guys. All right. The sun-blinded soldier. The survivor, known as the sun-blinded soldier, was an unremarkable young man who was raised while working his family's farm in Annexar. Originally known as John, he lived a relatively simple and straightforward life with his parents and two young twin brothers managing the farm, which was not successful enough to make them wealthy, but did produce enough to keep them comfortable. When the call to serve in the war came, John knew immediately that he would go. His brothers, Rhett and Rowan, worked well together under their parents' direction and could help keep the farm running while John was away. The twins were not yet old enough to serve. Though they were close, John was thankful that they had not yet crossed that threshold, and his parents were too. But John was proud to be the one representing his family on the battlefield. When the infamous battle broke out, Neither John nor anyone on the front lines knew how impactful it would be to the future of Soldamis. On the battlefield, John held his own reasonably well, but the battle was a bloody one, and soldiers from both sides were falling fast. As the day stretched on, it was all John could do to stay on his feet. His head was swimming inside his helmet. The heat of the sun was unrelenting. The losses were wearing on him as well. Night fell, and the battle stretched on. The only thing worse than the oppressive heat of the sun was the frightening darkness of the battlefield. Hip lanterns and torches casting deep shadows across the faces of the fallen. Seeing so many bodies fall, hearing the agonizing screams, John knew this day would haunt him. Perhaps it was haunting him even now. He felt as he could be hearing his name being called. John! John! He heard in the distance. The voice sounded familiar, but it could not be, could it? John snapped back to reality just in time to dodge a blow and take out the man who threw it. There it was again, his name, amid the clash of metal and cries of agony. It was there. He was sure of it. John fought his way towards the sound. He continued to wonder if he was going crazy right up until the moment he nearly stumbled across his brother. John could not believe his eyes. What are you doing here, Rhett? You're not supposed to be here. John cried as he collapsed to the ground where his younger sibling lay, his lantern casting their battle-weary faces into sharp relief. What has happened? Are you hurt? Why are you here? What about Mom and Dad? The questions poured out of John before his brain had fully caught up to the situation. Where's Rowan? We followed you, Rhett replied, wincing. We didn't want to sit back on the farm while you fought alone. You're not even old enough, John replied in disbelief. We lied about our age, Rhett groaned. John cursed under his breath. Where does it hurt? Where's your brother? Tell me now so I can help you. Rhett's eyes swam. He took in a sharp breath. Why does it always get me? It's this like war stuff, man. Then exhaled slowly. His chest did not rise again. All right, I need you to take over, K-Fox.
Rhett! John knew his little brother would not wake up, but he couldn't accept it. He banged on his armor, shouting for him to wake up. As he did so, a sword came down and caught him in the shoulder, his armor thankfully taking the heft of the blow. John was on his feet, fueled by the pain of loss, and made quick work of the assailant. Rowan! John called out into the battlefield. Rowan! John fought his way across the battlefield, which was increasingly empty of upright bodies. The ones littering the ground threatened to trip him as he searched the faces for a glimmer of recognition. The shadows twisted everything into exaggerations of John's worst nightmares. Grimaced faces warped into angry snarls, and twisted limbs seemed to reach and grasp in the flickering light of his torch. Though few remained, there were also living bodies to contend with as well, some extinguishing their torches and using the dark as cover until they attacked. John's pain and rage fueled him in every encounter that distracted him from finding his little brother. Not Rowan, too. Damn it, I cannot lose them both. He made his way across the battlefield, looking into the faces of the fallen. Delirious in his fear and grief and exhaustion, he eventually removed his helm. He hardly registered that there was no one else to fight. He kept searching. His body shook, his mouth painfully dry, but he continued to look, would not allow himself to rest, even for a moment, until, finally, the face of his second little brother, Rowan, is spotted just near the edge of an oceanside cliff. John falls to his knees by his sibling and lets out a roar of grief and anger. Eventually, he finds he is numb, in body and mind and heart, after the fighting and the loss. Once he has cried all the tears within him, he stands up and looks out over the cliff his brother's body rests beside. It was not really a decision so much as a feeling that the thing he wanted to do in that moment was to throw himself off of it. The sun was rising in front of him, and a new day was dawning before his eyes. A rocky island in the distance came into view across the ocean, but he did not register any of this. John stood at the cliff's edge and stared, numb and tired. He knew he could not carry this weight, bear this pain, and face his parents to give them the news when he returned home. To let go would be simplest, and he felt so heavy. To fall would be the easiest thing in the world. But it was then that Solaron manifested in front of him. John stared into the face of the god of the sun and marveled as around him the ocean boiled, sending a deluge of steam into the sky that coated the battlefield in an otherworldly fog, lit by the radiant god's presence. It was then that Solaron enlightened the soldier, the lone survivor of the bloody battle. John did not avert his gaze as Solaron imparted his divine wisdom. The soldier was guided to share the need for all inhabitants of Soldamus to extinguish war and set alight life in the name of Solaron, and John promised that he would. No more senseless death, no more unneeded loss, just peace, just rest. As Solaron retreated, though day had broken for the rest of the world, for John, the world turned black. It was then that he realized he had been blinded by the sun, the cost of being bathed in Solaron's radiant light and becoming the vessel for his prophecy. John, now referred to only as the sun-blinded soldier, shared Solaron's message as instructed. He cited his lack of vision for why he could not continue to help on the farm, and instead chose to live solitarily in a modest shack on the western outskirts of Annexar. He said it was so he could stand on an oceanside cliff at sunrise every day in service to the god of the sun. I guess that should be an eastern cliff, sorry. But some believe the real reason to be that living at home without his brothers and feeling responsible to his parents for their deaths was too much for him to bear. Followers of Solaron soon set up camp on the land around the sun-blinded soldier's home, wanting to be near the sun god's first prophet. In the morning, the sun-blinded soldier would engage in the ritual of the dawn with all gathered outside. They looked out toward the Isle of Aralis, where the holy church of Solaron had been constructed, as the soldier preached the radiant god's message. At sunset, a similar ceremony was observed for the gloaming prayer, but otherwise, the soldier would stay inside, alone, and remember his brothers, whisper prayers for his parents, and hope that due to Solaron's proclamation, no one else would have to feel the pain that plagued his heart every moment of every day. This is how he lived, oblivious to outside events, even to the rise of lunarism, right up until his death at the hands of Alara the Night Stalker.
Every time I read through that, it gets me very, very in the feels because it's just such a good story. And it's a sad one. Can we give a round of applause in chat, by the way, for the awesome work that K-Fox has done on this, by the way? A quick round of applause. This is just such awesome work.
I just wanted to make everyone cry. So
we don't want it to be too sad, but we want it to be, relatable and a meaningful story. This next one also can get a little bit in the feels in some moments. So again, I'll try to read as much as I can here. But if I get choked up on it, please take over. Alara the Night Stalker, and this is a great story of not duality isn't the word I'm looking for, but like the fact that sometimes things seem like the other side, like whoever is not your side, is the villain. But like as you're listening to both of these stories, it becomes kind of apparent that everybody's the victim. Like with war, there are no winners, right? And with conflict, there are no winners. And so hopefully you can understand and relate to both sides. And then depending on, as the story progresses, which ones you guys personally align with, because I know a lot of you guys have like favorite factions, favorite gods that you follow. If any of you have a feeling one way or the other towards solarism or lunarism, both can be right, because they all have a truth to like their origin stories, and they're justified in their actions in some ways, right? So let's kind of get into that. Alara led an unremarkable life in Welfine, educated at a traditional school in Bergamer, in conjunction with a more hands-on training in nature preservation and the duties of elves in the forest surrounding the shifting city. But from a young age, Alara wanted to know more about the world beyond the trees. However, even the thought of leaving Welfine's borders was forbidden by her parents, who were elf purists that believed that the world beyond Welfine was not only dangerous, but could sully and corrupt an elf were she not careful. But Alara was brave, and finally old enough to be out on her own. She decided she could not stand not knowing what was out there any longer, and told her parents she was spending time with a friend outside the city for a while. She bartered to gain passage on a ship crossing the Inwelt Sea, and before long found herself in the foreign land of Annexar. Alara had heard her whole life that this area was dangerous and unstable, but given the nocturnal nature of her people and the skill of elves to read a forest, she found she could travel at night and encounter little danger. She hunted and dressed her own meat, cooking it over campfires only during the day, cloaking her fire in the light of the sun as best she could. But mostly, she used the days to sleep and crept along by the light of the moon, her only companion as she explored the undeveloped areas of Annexar for days. Eventually, Alara came to a small city. She fell in love immediately. It was nothing like the shifting trees of Bergamer. It was quaint and organized and logical. The climate was wonderful. She kept a constant haze that all but blocked out most of the sun. The sky kept a constant haze that all but blocked out most of the sun, meaning she could be up in the daytime during the hustle and bustle of the city and its surrounding farmlands without much strain on her sensitive eyes and skin, a byproduct of being a member of the nocturnal moon elves. This city, which Alara learned was called Tomarol, captured her heart, and soon so did a human who lived within it. Theon was his name. He called himself a simple peasant, but he seemed to have no problem providing for himself. As a keeper of livestock, he knew almost as much about animals as Alara did. They spent their days together, Theon giving Alara tours of the city and treating her to its culinary treats, as well as allowing her to accompany him while he worked with the animals. She never wanted to leave, but Alara thought it was unfair to let her parents start to worry. She knew she needed to go back to Welfine, but she promised to return. Alara had never intended to tell her parents of her adventures. Though she was an adult, though just barely by elven standards, she knew the knowledge would only make them worry. But her time with Theon was not something that she had bargained for. She could not keep the feelings enveloping her to herself. They had to know what a treasure she had found. The outside world was not only full of danger, there was love out there as well. Alara had expected her parents to need some convincing before they understood how she felt about Theon, but she had believed that they indeed could be convinced. Now, she realized how incredibly naive that was. She was told she could choose either to never see Theon again or never return to her parents' home. Indeed, never to return to Welfine itself, ever again. By engaging with a human, they believed she was putting herself and all the elven race in danger, and they would not stand for it. Alara knew most of the residents of the forest would agree. She did not want to give up all that she had ever known and loved, but she also did not want to give up the whole rest of the world, especially now that she knew what joy lay beyond. It was a hard decision, and one that caused her pain each and every day, but Alara said goodbye to her parents and once again crossed the Inwelt Sea. She and Theon lived happily ever after for over a decade in Tomarol. Alara came to be a well-respected butcher, a compliment to her human husband's excellent livestock rearing. Despite the emptiness where the love of the rest of her family should be, Alara was happy. When word of war spread, at least one able-bodied person from each family signed up to fight. Alara said she was more than capable and that she and Theon should go together, but Theon reminded her of their little secret, not shared with anyone yet, that rested inside of her belly. She was strong, but the stress of battle was not something she should endure at the moment. Alara knew he was right. She tried not to cry when she kissed Theon goodbye, not having been separated from him for the night since her return to Tomarol all those many years ago. He promised he would return to her soon. But he did not return. There was a battle with a soul survivor, and it was not her Theon, but some other Anaxarian man called the Sun-Blinded Soldier. He supposedly acted as a prophet for Solaron and called for peace across the land. But when Theon did not come home, peace was the last thing Alara wanted. She mourned heavily, vacillating between debilitating bouts of melancholy and violent fits of rage. During this time, she rarely ate or took care of herself, and it was no surprise to her when there were signs that her pregnancy was no longer with her. She accepted it with a numbness that has stayed with her ever since. Once the rumors about the Lunaris made their way to Alara, she saw an opportunity, much like when she was a newly minted adult elf and chose to take action to broaden her world, to cross the sea and change her life. She knew that once again action would be a way forward. She participated heavily within the budding lunarism movement, but grew frustrated with all the talk with little follow-through. Fine, if no one else would act, she would be the first. She literally had nothing else to lose. The few she let in on her plan discouraged her, but she would not be swayed. Alara did not think it would be so easy to walk into the Sun-Blinded Soldier's home, but she met no resistance, a fact now attributed to the silvery light of Lunariel. She took his life not unmercifully. It was not him she had her grievance with, but the whole world, and this would be the first step in molding it into something that resembled justice for Theon, and for their baby that never was. She left a small patch depicting the moon on the soldier's mouth, and walked out of his home uncontested, from that point on known as Alara the Night Stalker. Don't want to go into that yet. That's some heavy stuff. So yeah, some heavy stories, but like it gives you guys a little bit of the background to some of the other conflicts that we may see throughout various expansions. If they touch on solarism and lunarism, there's way more stuff to it. This is specifically talking about like some of the characters. There's several different sects, and they have different beliefs that follow these religions. There's like we kind of briefly talk about it in this where it says that like the movement was kind of already happening and she was aware of it, but she's the one who's deciding to take action instead of just talking about it. There's like some stuff where like some of the budding things that happened was like a lot of the families that were grieving from the loss of their family members in the war were receiving like care packages in the middle of the night, and all that it had to signify where it came from was the little patch with the moon on it, which is the same one that she leaves on his mouth after the assassination. So there's like a lot of like really cool and deep stories that we're starting to build in this world. And we're trying not to give everything to you guys all at once, but I hope that these two specific stories talking about these false gods and these religions that drive a lot of decisions from these civilizations kind of gets you guys motivated as well. And no, I'm going to just be completely straight with you guys. The two neutral cards are not going to be Alara and John, the Sunlighted Soldier. That is not coming in the next expansion. We are talking about future progress of things that are going to be happening. Maybe at some point we'll do like a callback season where we introduce these characters or, you know, some kind of a thing like that. But the story that we're planning to tell in sequential order is something a little bit different. We want John. Alara would be really cool to see. And it's something that, like, you know, there's room for all these characters to make their way through. There's a lot of characters that you guys already know as well. And I'll just be honest, right? Like, you guys have talked to us openly about, you know, some of you not liking the fact that we changed Monsters' Rights Association to the Wild Horde. And I've constantly kind of reassured you guys there's reason for that. And hopefully as we're explaining this lore to you, it makes a little more sense, like thematically, what we're trying to go for with Droth, rather than it being this like unionizing of monsters. It is just more like a manipulation of emotion, which also lets us introduce characters under the Wild Horde faction that aren't just monsters. We're going to have, you know, potential other like humanoids and things that are also having their emotions manipulated in the future. So it's just a little bit more broad and kind of fits into this narrative that we're trying to go with. But like you have characters like Alcar and all the current dungeon masters and a lot of their stories, which we haven't really covered in the lore. And technically it's all like before, and there'll be parts of in ways that we'll release that lore as we like define it more, because there is like plot points for some of that stuff, but it's not like the major stories. What you've seen from like Crusade of Sun and Stone and what you will see in the next expansion, which is the Ashes of Renku expansion. That's where you're going to kind of see us telling this like cohesive story with clear characters and matching abilities and stuff like that. And we're happy about that. What is this? Can we just confirm I'm Apothecary's husband real quick? I mean, you did change your name back. All I said in the past, and I'll say it again, is Apothecary was married to a man named Bill. Take or leave it however you want. But that's where it's at. Soldier One reminds me of the Wounded Guardian. Not the same person. All right. I do love engaging with the chat and seeing how you guys are reacting to this, but for the sake of those watching on YouTube afterwards, we are going to keep moving on a little bit here. And the next stuff is the Crusade of Sun and Stone. And this is going to be a really long one, so just let me know when you want me to take over, K-Fox, but I'll let you start.
Do you want to just switch with each little section?
Sure, yeah, where the line breaks are, we could do that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that'll just be easier.
Go for it.
Okay. So the Crusade of Sun and Stone. Aisha's days stretched on. Her nights were no better. The Shawakan Desert had relented little even after the sun sunk beneath the dunes and night washed over the sands. But she did not really feel the heat anymore, just the slow passage of time, of which she had an unlimited supply. Her army was almost ready. She took great pride in her work. The reanimated corpses under her control were stronger and more stable than ever before. Far from the shambling, crumbling monsters she created early on, these could do some damage and take quite a beating. Not as resilient as living flesh, of course, but Aisha was a dreamer, and she dreamt that one day, perhaps her army of corpses could be just as strong, if not stronger, than the mages who banished her and doomed her to a life, if you could call it that, in the harsh desert. All for daring to dream.
Each of these line breaks, by the way, guys, is kind of switching perspectives. So, like, we're going to be telling the story from different areas and kind of how that's all going to come together. Councilman Lazar readied the troops. The heralds of the solstice was prepared and already in formation at the port of Aralis. With the blessing of Solaron and the backing of the Holy Church, the crusade, beginning in Anaxar and making its way to ultimately face the heretical mages of the Shilwakan Desert, was bound to be successful, if bloody. The rumors of the worship of other gods in Anaxar had only reached the level of backroom whispers, but it was enough. Best to quell these mumblings before they grew to murmurs. From there, the worship of illegitimate gods would advance to being right out in the open, and then the issue would be much more difficult to squash. The elite warriors were itching for some action. The sharp steel of their swords was far too clean and dry. Time to get them dirty in the service of the light.
They saw the ships from the shores of Piata Oris, visitors from Aralis. This was not uncommon, as the island fortress often sent traders out to the city-states of Anaxar. Which one they sailed for depended on the politics of the day and which region was most stable and amiable to visitors at the moment. It looked like this day they had their sights set on Piata Oris. The ships. It was quite a lot of ships. As each appeared over the horizon, discomfort grew in those who had gathered to welcome the traders. A trading expedition had never sent more than a few vessels. Could this be? The first ship approached the dock, and soldiers poured off the vessel, their heavy armor gleaming in the sun. Parents clutched their children, and many retreated from the port altogether as the heralds of the solstice continued to disembark from their ships, one after another. The Piatan citizens quickly understood that this was anything but a trading expedition.
Real quick, too, maybe I can put on screen a rough draft of our map, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a reference here for area we're kind of talking about. Let me see here. Oh, I don't want to open up Photoshop. Did I not save the map anywhere else? All right, give me a sec. Sorry about the delay, just trying to pull it up real quick. All right. Can everybody see that on the screen? All right, so this is kind of a non-finalized version of kind of the map of Seldamus, and we're only going to really be talking about the area that matters right now, which for our story is kind of over here. So the conflict that we talked about with the sun-blinded soldier was kind of, I believe it was like in this region or on this region. Can't remember specifically, but it's on one of the coasts here in the cliff. And the reason why Aralis became kind of the holy ground was because as the sun was rising, he had the hallucination of the sun god. And thus they view that as like a holy ground, and like literally off in that same direction that he was looking was this island of Aralis. And that's where they built this, the holy church, right? So Piata Oris is going to be kind of in this area over here. That's where the port city is, and they're going to be working their way through their crusade down towards Shilwaka. And that's going to be kind of be as we're describing this conflict. Just note that this is kind of the path and the areas that we're talking about for this expansion only. Councilman Lazar watched as the heralds of the solstice swarmed the shores of Piata Oris. The Holy Church of Solaron had many disciples of radiance, scholars who made for excellent intelligence agents, stationed in the region who had sent back reports of the blasphemy taking place within the coastal city and across Annexar as a whole. Even so, the Crusaders would investigate before any official accusations would fall, though the councilman already knew exactly what they would find, and he knew his heralds would be eager to lay out the punishment the city's transgressions would require, for the good of the Piatan citizens, of course. It was a blessing, really, for the crusade to arrive on their shores, reminding them who the one true God was and what it meant to serve him or face the consequences.
The Augur Order's intelligence networks were swift and efficient, so news of the crusade at Piata Oris spread through Annexar quickly. In Tamaral, there was a stir of unrest at the report. The city-state famously kept to itself, its nobles preferring to remain cloaked in quiet secrecy, and its citizens content to farm and trade and stay out of their region's politics. And they were generally successful at doing so. But a crusade cared little for their desires, and as Tamaralians did not tend to worship the sun god with much fervor, if at all, it was not a wild guess that the heralds of the solstice would soon be at their border. The citizenry held out hope that the heralds of the solstice would pass them by and continue their trek into Shiwaka, for they were certain that must be their ultimate target. But they were not fools, and they began to prepare for an assault nonetheless.
The news came to Aisha like whispers on the wind. Something was coming. She grinned, though someone looking on might mistake it for a grimace through her bandages. Just what she had been hoping for, target practice for her army. This new crop's first real test. It was not lost on her that this was a test of her skills as a dungeon master as well. The embalmed savant, she called herself, and at raising the dead and enchanting them so they could fight and obey, a savant she certainly was. With her army shambling behind her, the mummified dungeon master moved east, dragging her wrapped feet through the sand, unable to feel its scorching heat reach out and sear her soles. Though if she could, she would relish the way it drove her forward.
It did not take long for the rats to run out of the shadows. Councilman Lazar's heralds quickly uncovered the wicked grasp of the plundering guild and the Augur Order. The Augur Order had on Piata Oris. Its politicians, its nobles, even its traders and builders were not untouched by the sullied mark of these followers of inferior and illegitimate gods. The polished tactics of the elite heralds of the solstice were extremely efficient at flushing out the heretics, and, after they were presented at the city center and executed for their crimes, the example would be made and the Holy Church's message would resound throughout the city and beyond. The Piatan citizens would fall in line with the rest of Annexar, soon following suit. After that, the troops would advance south. The heralds of the solstice would make an appearance at other city-states as they moved through Annexar, ensuring each took the example of Piata Oris to heart and gladly unsheathing their swords to clarify for anyone who seemed not to have received their message. Next, they would target the blasphemous mages of Shiwaka, the atheistic desert society, a frequent target of Aralis' ire, and the fitting proving grounds for this crusade. The heralds of the solstice would whet their blades on as many heretics between them and their final goal as necessary, and maybe a few more.
In Tamaral, tensions were rising. Word that the heralds of the solstice's work was nearly done in Piata Oras, and the Crusaders would soon be moving south. Though Tamaral preferred to stay out of the conflict, they were not entirely helpless. However, even the most militant of the Annexarian city-states were little match for the heralds of the solstice, and the Tamaralians figured the Auralians would raise their quiet farming city without breaking a sweat. Even so, they would not go down without a fight. The Tamaralian farmers and guards gathered their weapons and armor and prepared. By the way, guys, I love that you're linking all this lore stuff to the cards that exist in chat. Keep doing that because there's plenty of them. Yeah, the Ralis Miranite, Fall of Piotr Ass as a card. As we're talking about Tamaral, there's a turncoat, right? Like, keep track of that as we keep going.
In a few moments, at high noon, under the strongest and most cleansing light of the sun, they would begin. Councilman Lazar looked down approvingly at the row of heretics marked for execution. Plundering Guild and Augur Order members presented to the gathered Piatan citizens. They were bound and hooded, but members of the crowd knew who they were. knew what was about to become of them. Many heralds of the solstice had to act as crowd control to stop the common rabble from surging forward out of anger and desperation. The councilman gave his speech, explaining to those gathered how an example must be made, a sacrifice given. He told them how the radiant god shines on them even now in this dark time, and soon, with this act, the clouds will be lifted and the warmth of Solaron would finally be felt by this city once again. He gave the command for the executions to commence. Set alight their redemption in the name of Solaron! But as the first prisoner was pushed forward into their knees, trembling and awaiting the blade of the heavy sword wielded by a herald of the solstice executioner, a rock flew out of the crowd, hitting the herald square on his helmet. Heralds, find who threw that and make them regret it, Lazar commanded. He would not have his authority mocked by these mainland heretics. But another rock flew, and another. One hit the councilman at the temple. He had not been wearing his helmet as he gave his speech. With that, his already thin patience was fully extinguished, and as more rocks came flying and those gathered started to surge forward, Councilman Lazar's voice rang out over the chaos. Burn them to the ground! And with that, the heralds of the solstice was unleashed upon the city.
Aisha was nearing Almaden. She could see the city lights over the dunes to the southeast already. She would be giving the Shilwakan capital a wide berth, as it was the zealots from Aralis she'd been training her army on this time. The Almaldinians who took part in her ousting, and their loved ones, hell, the whole city, could have a taste one day, but it was not yet time for that. However, as she marched herself and her militia of risen corpses forward, she could sense that the time was drawing near.
The news of the fall of Piata Oris traveled quickly, and the heralds of the solstice pressed forward almost just as quickly, making their way to the city-state of Mijlok with little time wasted. Despite their impressive training, the heralds of the solstice's forces were not impenetrable, and Anexarian city-states were not pushovers. Mijlok's citizens had known their city would be the next target, and they prepared for the heralds of the solstice's arrival from the moment the news spread that the crusade had hit Piata Oris's shores. It was not much different in Scandura and Waltaire. Each city-state sent quick word to the mercenary camp of Solida to recruit fighters for their cause, a common practice across the region when extra brawn was required to settle a dispute. And the Anexarians prepared themselves to take up arms against the heralds of the solstice. The clash came just as anticipated. The Mijlok fighters, with the mercenaries hired to battle by their sides, managed to make a dent in the heralds of the solstice's numbers. However, with Piata Oris serving as a warning call, once the tides began to turn against Mijlok, their surrender came quickly, lest they become the next lesson the heralds of the solstice wanted to teach the region. The herald's next hit was Waltaire, which was known to have a particularly heavy plundering guild presence and deep coffers to match. Word is that though they put up a fight, they chose to pay the heralds of the solstice off before their losses grew too large. The councilman accepting a performance of mass conversion as an acceptable obeisance and the hefty bribe as a tithe to the god of the sun. In Scandura, the city militia and hired mercenaries worked together to great effect, taking out an impressive number of herald members in the clash at their gates. But as the elite Auralian fighters gained entrance to their city and the upper hand in battle, Scandura accepted defeat before the herald deemed it necessary to bring them fully to their knees. Stories swirled that clashes with the wild horde in the deep wilderness between cities added to the herald of the solstice's casualties, but their march south never abated. Their arrival at Tamaral was inevitable. And so, Tamaral prepared. They did not employ mercenaries, as they preferred to keep things internal, and the citizens vowed they would not be bullied into submission like their neighbors. Surprise was their best bet, as brute force alone would never win against the elite heralds of the solstice. So they planned and plotted. They set traps. They hid. They waited. But one citizen, he believed in the sun god's cause. As a recent transplant to Tamaral, ousted from his former home, he was not yet assimilated to the Tamaralian way of life. And if the city was going to be flattened by the heralds of the solstice, he wanted to be sure he was on the winning side. So, the turncoat set out, intending to intercept Lazar and his forces and trade information for his life. Venturing into the dense forest, he aimed to intercept the marching heralds.
Councilman Lazar could not be happier. With efficient movements and organized formations, the formidable army marked one city-state after another off of their list, ensuring each of the areas they passed through knew the might of Solaron and would not question it again soon. Their losses were not negligible, but unavoidable, and each member of the Heralds knew what they signed up for and would be happy to pay the ultimate price in the name of the Radiant God. They had but one more settlement to hit in this region, the perpetually mysterious Tomaral. But the Anaxarian city-states were just the appetizer. The heathens in the desert would be the main course, and the army's stomachs were rumbling. As they approached the overcast city at the foot of the mountains, a figure emerged from the shadows of the forest. Suspecting him to be an ambush or a strategic distraction, it took restraint not to flatten him immediately, but the councilman ordered the troops to hear him out. He was a turncoat, heavy with information about the Tomaralians' preparation for their arrival. As he unloaded everything, all the intel he had, the councilman thanked him. Lazar told the turncoat that his sacrifice to the sun god would not go unrewarded. Then the army marched on, leaving the man alone in the forest. His reward would be that he was able to keep his life, but with his betrayal now fully realized, he found he had no place to go. The beasts of the forest licked their lips in the shadows around him as the army moved into the distance and the sun sunk beneath the trees.
The next day, the heralds hit Tomaral with exacting force. The farming community's surprises failed one after another, and it seemed they would soon have to swear loyalty to the sun god or see everything they knew razed to the ground. Tides turned, however, when the nobles of the city descended upon the fray en masse. A darkness fell over the battle, like the sun had set and nothing but a new moon hung in the sky. The Solaranians held strong, but Tomaral's mysterious nobles turned the tides of battle in a way the heralds of the solstice had not anticipated. Something about the darkness caused the crusaders to falter. Some soldiers seemed to lose chunks of time, unsure where they had been, returning to the front lines with a pall washed over them. More and more soldiers became disoriented, pale, and weak. The councilman called for his heralds to regroup, and the Tomaralian nobles took the opportunity to offer entry into negotiations, which the councilman agreed to entertain, if for no other reason than to give his army a strategic rest. At the meeting with Lazar, the Tomaralian nobles refused to remove their hoods, their faces remaining obscured, their entire bodies covered by their robes. Their voices sounded like wind through a forest at night, and though they refused to swear fealty to the sun god, they vowed that no other gods would be venerated within their city either. Councilman Lazar gave one last volley of threats, but in reality, the city was not their target, and their time and energy could be better spent raining down the sun god's wrath on the desert heretics, who posed a much greater threat to the influence of Solaron across Soldamis. After the appropriate amount of political theater, the councilman accepted the compromise while promising himself that he and his herald would one day return to Tomaral to finish the job. Though none of them would admit it, he and the heralds of the solstice alike were glad to be away from the dark shroud of the city, their point made well enough for now. Paradoxically, when the representatives of the sun left their city, the Tomaralians saw the darkness lift. The nobles retreated, their actions as mysterious and inexplicable as ever, and under familiar gray skies, the farmers tended to the wounded and began to mend their damaged property.
Very interesting place that we'll definitely come back to in future expansions. I see some chats or some people talking in the chats about Alteron. King Alteron is in a completely different region. If we look at the map again here, real quick, King Alteron is in Anaria in Garsong, all the way over here. So not going to be talked about in this expansion. Aisha expected the Rallians to head to the Obsidian Institute first, the university having been a target in the past and the closest structure to the border of Anaxar. She positioned herself and her army strategically amid the dunes, out of the direct sight, but ready to intercept. All that was left was to wait. She could hear the rhythmic thud of the heralds of the solstice boots as they marched their way towards her across the sands. With her army of undead at her back and the sun-scorched dunes soon to serve as a battlefield stretched before her, she was ready.
Now that the confounding skirmish at Tomaral was behind them, Councilman Lazar was getting excited despite himself. He could see the Eastern Shilwakan University in the far distance. He could feel the unrelenting heat beginning to bear down, and while it should feel like an obstacle, instead it felt like impending victory. They had trained for this, and they had Solaron on their side against these desert-dwelling heretics. All the battles before this were the warm-up. It was finally time for the main event. The councilman knew news of his forces' movements would have traveled to the region by now, but he didn't anticipate any interference on their march, as he also knew the Shawakans liked to use the harsh desert to their favor, rarely advancing to meet intruders, instead forcing offenders to pass over the unforgiving dunes, tire themselves in the scorching heat, and come all the way to the Shawakans, rested and conditioned to the merciless climate, before the battle would begin. Lazar felt so confident that they would walk right up to the university doors before they were challenged, that he strategized that his army would benefit from a night of rest before they spanned the final distance between them and the first congregation of heretics that they would introduce to the full might of the radiant god. "Halt!" the councilman commanded, and his forces stopped in their tracks, their formation unbroken. The sun was already dipping toward the horizon in front of them. There was enough light to settle by, and they would rise at dawn, their god's image shining behind them, urging them forward as they finished their advance. "We camp here tonight." Though he could sense his army's thirst for battle, their target distant but within reach, they followed orders without complaint, and as the sun fell below the horizon, so too did the heralds of the solstice lay down to rest.
Aisha could not believe her luck. Sure, there were sentries posted, and her advance would not be a complete surprise, but it would certainly manage to catch the Crusaders off guard. She had anticipated clashing with a fully mobilized army, but engaging with them at night while their guard was down would be a totally different experience, one she felt certain was in her favor. She waited patiently until the majority of the soldiers had retired before commanding her army forward. The heralds of the solstice had no idea what was coming, and soon she would be upon them.
Councilman Lazar was wrested from his dreams by a commotion in the camp and had his sword in his hand before the fog of sleep had totally lifted. An attack? Surely not from the university or Almadin. It must be a band of foolhardy nomads the heralds will dispense with quickly. The councilman was not worried. Upon exiting his tent, he was met with chaos. His soldiers seemed to have forgotten their training in their sleep. There were no practiced formations, no coordinated advancement. In fact, there was little advancement at all. Lazar moved into the fray to examine the situation. They were not fighting university scholars or militia members from Almadin. They were also not facing a band of overly ambitious nomads. What had entered the camp was a horror that they had not prepared for in their endless drills back on Aralis. An army of the dead. Like his soldiers, the scene knocked the councilman off guard, but despite his horror, he recovered quickly. "Heralds of the solstice! Prepare!" The grotesque enemy did not behave like any foe they had met in battle before. There was no self-preservation, no logic to their assault. They threw themselves at the heralds with no regard for their lives, if you could call them that, or safety, advancing with a wild abandon that the heralds had never been trained to encounter. The enemy, their sunken-in faces, the pungent stench that swirled around them, the implications of their presence on the battlefield, it all caused one's stomach to turn. But Lazar's command was effective in bringing his soldiers' attention where it was needed. Coming face to face with death had been difficult to reckon with, but the familiarity of a formation, the rote call and response, and the straightforwardness of simply following your commander's orders brought them back to their training. The soldiers called out in reply, and Lazar again raised his voice over the din of battle. "Formation 6!" The members of the heralds organized themselves, filling the gaps left by their fallen brethren until their lines were tight. They called out to their leader, indicating they were listening and ready. "Advance! Advance! Advance!" Lazar's voice commands rang out across the battlefield, his soldiers pressing forward in unison with his orders. They clashed with the enemy again, this time as one, the singular, coordinated mass of armor and weapons Lazar knew them to be.
Aisha's undead army had certainly caught the Crusaders by surprise, and she managed a few casualties in the chaos of the initial fray. As expected, though, the Heralds of the Solstice rallied and fell back on their training. The shock of her arrival spent, and the instincts drilled into them finally rising to the surface. But she had more than one trick up her sleeve. As the fighters from Aralis were distracted by taking down her army, she would raise another, and little did the Heralds of the Solstice know that they would be the ones supplying the fighters.
The clash was turning in the Heralds of the Solstice's favor. Lazar had moved to the rear to observe the battle and strategize further. His soldiers were using their training well, and it appeared the army of profane combatants that had descended on them was losing bodies at a steady pace. It would not be long before his heralds put them all to rest. but some sort of commotion had broken out. As his soldiers on the front lines pushed forward, those toward the middle had their attention elsewhere. First here, then there, more and more his soldiers' formations were deteriorating into chaos, but he could not see why. Sword out, he pushed his way into the fray, either to put an end to whatever threat was pulling his army out of line, or to discipline any members of the heralds breaking protocol and putting their companions at risk. But when he made his way to the first whirl of disorder among his ranks, he found his soldiers standing around a fallen member of the heralds. "What's the meaning of this?" the councilman barked. Before any answer could be given, a volley of shouts broke out nearby, and soldiers who had been dutifully facing forward, moving ahead in their formation, were forced to turn and defend themselves from adversaries at their backs. A similar scene played out where the councilman stood. Then another, her head nearly severed from her soldiers, raised her sword up to attack. Her fellow soldiers defended themselves, but were reluctant to land a heavy blow despite the risk she posed, unwilling to take up arms against someone they had known, trained with, and trusted with their lives only moments before. The councilman's worst fears were realized, but he knew what was needed. He ran his sword through her. It was a kindness, both to her and the soldiers who had not wanted to do it themselves. But his action also gave his soldiers permission. The fallen are not heralds of the solstice anymore. They are the enemy. "They're using our dead against us," Lazar shouted. "Don't let sentimentality come between us and our mission." It was unclear how far his message spread across the battlefield as more and more heralds of the solstice rose from the dead. Living soldiers were surrounded, undead on all sides and rising amid their formations. Confusion and distrust were sown across the battlefield as Lazar's troops could not tell who was friend and who was foe. You cannot engage in strategic positioning when the enemy could rise at any side of you, could be wearing the same armor as you, bear the same insignia across their chest, and be indistinguishable from your allies. The heralds of the solstice was falling apart.
Aisha watched with wicked satisfaction as the heralds of the solstice was being picked apart. It was a delight to observe, but not nearly as... what is that word?
Saccharine?
Saccharine? It was not nearly as saccharine as it would be when she employed these tactics against the arrogant mages she had sworn to destroy. By banishing her, they had put themselves on the wrong side of the power she was developing, and she could not wait to see their faces when they realized what they were missing, what they could have learned from her, what they could have done with her at their sides. As she allowed herself a moment to bask in the possibility, she almost missed the glint of steel in the moonlight. Jumping back just in time, she found herself face to face with Councilman Lazar.
"Call off your demons, heretic," Lazar barked at the embalmed monster before him. She was clearly once a woman, likely a Shawakan mage, but whatever dark magic she was practicing left her only vaguely resembling a human any longer. "Call them off." "I don't think so," the beast responded, her voice dry like dry leaves scraping across sand. Lazar wondered if the grimace that spread across her face was meant to be interpreted as a smile. The bedlam at Lazar's back grated at him. He knew his soldiers were falling, and he knew he had to stop it, quickly. "Every one of yours that falls rises again just for me," that grimace again. "Soon the battlefield will be a sea of dead. Your crusade will be at an end, and mine will be just beginning." If she was the source of this disgusting magic, then she would have to be culled. Putting an end to her would also put an end to the enchantment she controlled and save his soldiers. Lazar gripped his sword and bellowed, "By the light of Solaron!" And then he struck.
Aisha dodged the blow, telegraphed so plainly as it was. She continued to dodge and strafe, knowing the man she faced was tired, mentally and physically, and distracted by the sounds of his soldiers battling their worst nightmares just behind him, being forced to cut down their own brothers and sisters over and over again, assuming they were not themselves cut to the ground only to rise as another of the Aisha's puppets. But not all of her puppets were needed for that task, and she commanded some to disengage. Steadily, they shambled over to the clash between her and the councilman. Lazar felt fatigue deep in his bones. The beast was quicker than she had the right to be, but his training ran deep, and with everything on the line, he was not close to giving up. He continued to advance on her, keeping her eyes on her toes. Or it should be keeping his eyes on her toes? Waiting for the right opportunity.
Keeping her on her toes.
Oh, keeping her.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had eyes in there. Keeping her on her toes, waiting for the right opportunity. As he swung his sword, certainly this time it would finally strike true, A body came between him and the creature, and it instead took the blow. One of his own, reanimated, now struck down a second time. Lazar turned and found himself surrounded by a group of risen corpses, some of whom he recognized. They moved to strike. You're going to help make my revenge all that much sweeter, Lazar heard the beast rasp out behind him as she blocked a swing from a soldier who he had trained for the better part of a decade, whose family he knew, whose daughter wanted to join the Heralds of the Solstice, just like her dad when she grew up. He did not have time to think about what the beast could possibly mean as he swung his sword to meet the blade of another of the Heralds of the Solstice soldiers. Other undead, not from Morales, came up behind him and grasped him at the waist, attempting to pull him down. It limited Lazar's mobility, impairing his parries and strikes. A sharp, brittle noise reached Lazar over the brawl, and it occurred to him that it must be the sound of the beast laughing. She spoke words he did not understand, and one of the undead gripping his waist fell to the ground. It was as if it deflated, an empty bag where the body collapsed. Lazar was temporarily relieved that the weight of this thing was no longer dragging him down, but then he felt a blow. Not physical, something sinister and magical. A wave slammed into him. The beast again chanted something incomprehensible. Another of minions fell, and Lazar was struck. Again, and again. Soon the remaining creatures were upon him, and Lazar no longer had the strength to fight them off. The last thing he saw were the expressionless eyes of the undead heralds of the Solstice soldiers, who raised their swords through no will of their own and brought them down upon the commander. Then nothing.
Aisha's work was nearly done. Her experiment had been a success, and she would take what she had learned and turn it against her oppressors. She believed she was almost ready, but did not allow herself to get swept up in feelings of bravado. When that day came, her adversaries would not be so arrogant to think they were stronger than anything they could encounter. They would take more precautions, and they would not be worn down from a string of battles before their clash. With magic as their weapon, they would be a different type of challenge altogether, less predictable. But she was gathering the tools she needed to turn the tides in her favor. She grinned to herself and looked down at the body on the ground before her, nudging it with her foot, her wrappings dragging across the sand. Tools indeed, she said to herself before chanting her spell. As Lazar rose, she smiled at the idea of setting him loose on the mages within the tower. For now, she had let him finish off his own remaining soldiers, as a little appetizer, she thought to herself, and commanded him into battle just as the sun rose over the horizon.
Ooh. And that brings us to the end of what we had prepared for today, the end of the Crusade of Sun and Stone expansion. What did you guys think? I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the chat here. Lazar is technically dead, but also technically now a cursed cadaver. And which is such a cool thing because like as a card game, we can see characters come back in various forms. And while obviously Aisha is preparing for a conflict of her own in Chilwaka against the mages that abandoned her and outcast her from the cities, right? We'll probably see a plot point and an expansion about that at some point, and maybe you'll see a card that's Lazar as an undead form. You know, be kind of cool to see in the Dungeon Master faction, which is also something cool too, because like cards can shift from faction to faction. Some will have origins in one faction and switch to another. Something that you guys will actually see here in the next expansion, where a Plundering Guild member is going to be one of the key figures of the Dungeon Master faction. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the lore and enjoying the story. I know we had a lot here, 23 pages that we read today, but this is just literally scratching the surface. The world that K-Fox has helped us build and put together here is really pretty expansive, and we have a lot of stories still to tell. This is a long conflict, a very complicated battle with a lot of different moving parts, right? We have true gods, false gods, personal beliefs, personal desires, personal vendettas, true love, heartbreak, sadness. Like there is just going to be so much for you guys to experience as time keeps going on. Mulligan also does have a story. There's just so much that's not here in what we've been able to share with you guys today. But this is a start, and I hope that you guys appreciated it and got at least to see that peek of some of the true lore for the game. I'm going to try to do this semi regularly, and by what I mean by that is not like we're going to do this every week, But definitely, like, I want to make sure that we're at least at a bare minimum reading you guys the expansions, right, when they're happening. So probably shortly after the Ashes of Renku expansion releases, we'll have another live lore reading. Hopefully K-Fox will be willing to attend that again. And we'll be reading the story that goes on for that expansion after you guys have had a chance to kind of experience the cards. That way you guys will also be able to relate to the information because you'll have already gotten your hands on the cards, right? And there's a lot of other stuff still to come, a lot of secret stories that we'll release in different places. We want to get some of this story to you guys in the game as well. And so one of the commitments that we have and why the current expansion was delayed until March is we are going to be putting flavor text on every single card in the game, all of the existing cards and all the new cards that you're going to see in the next expansion. So be ready for that. And those will each tell little small hints at little bits of story for you guys to get excited about. We're also looking at introducing potentially some journals into the havens for you guys to find and pick up and read. And that might have a little bit of additional story for you guys to kind of understand about what's going on with the Ashes of Renku expansion. And if that goes well, you can expect to see that kind of thing again moving forward in future expansions. So we're trying to get this lore to you. This is going to be now my, I'll say, shameless call out for anyone in the community. We need help, right? Like, I've been delaying bringing this lore to you guys because I'm a perfectionist. I want this to be perfect, and I wanted to create a visual narrative, almost like you guys are watching a movie. Like, that's what I would love to get to, right? Realistically, it's just not possible for us to do that right now. And so I'm compromising and I'm doing this live lore reading, right? But if any of you guys in the community, I know we have so many talented individuals, want to help us bring this forward and do any kind of like artistic renditions, break up this lore into multiple videos with small animations, or even just like artwork stills with proper narrations and stuff, like, reach out to us at our email. You can do any of our emails. We've got the contact@divergent-realities.com, the support@divergentrealities.com, or even the contact@divergentrealities.com. Whichever one of those three, reach out. We would love to hear from you. If you want to DM me and have a conversation about it, please, we want to do something. We want to collaborate with you guys to make this happen, because I think you guys all deserve this lore. It's too good to keep to ourselves, right? So again, if everyone can please give a round of applause to K-Fox for helping build all of this lore and writing all of this and being here today to read it with you guys. We really appreciate it. So everyone, please give a thank you in chat for K-Fox being here. And just to me,
thank you all for caring about the game and being engaged with the lore and interested in it. And thanks, Avid, for helping me and guiding me to create some of these stories, based on all the cool stuff that already exists and will exist in the future that I'm so excited for you guys to see one day.
But other than that, guys, that's all I really have for you as part of the official lore. What we are going to do now is I'm going to end the